Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Friday, November 21st, 12:30 a.m. Hopefully, those of you who are rushing off to lunch will have something nutritious and delicious. And speaking of that, we were going to be talking about more lies coming from the coup. They must be getting desperate, and I'm sure they are because, as you know, Donald Trump is still in office and is still alive. Two things they did not count on at this point in the day. Uh, but let's be nice about this. First of all, we haven't talked about this part of it. We will get to it eventually. The stories now that you hear about the Bushies trying to get themselves back in position to take over the Republican Party come the end of Donald Trump's term is probably true. That's why Pence is out there. He was an op for them forever. It's embarrassing when you hear these men of God. The guys like him will definitely prove any atheist argument that there is no intercessional God because don't you think he would have gotten around to doing something with Mike Pence? But then again, everyone would say, well, he's really out there. The big G's out there to get Donald Trump. He's not out there to get Mike Pence. Mike Pence never having a job in his whole life, but running off to church while he in the back of supposedly his boss. But then again, his boss was really the Bush family, a bunch of jerk offs from Texas, Mitch McConnell and others. But since we're talking about jerk offs betraying the country, those of you who have seen the last few days a number of these guys and gals who are doing the videos telling you that you can, as a service person, just not listen to orders is pretty good, except for the fact that it should be being used by Trump's people to instruct the military as to what a psychological operation looks like. This is a standard of the socialists and goes way back in their bag of tricks to the very bottom, next to the lint and next to the dead of the Marxist revolution last time. And what it is this. The socialist system has in the past, when it goes to take over a country, it has to destabilize the entirety of the pyramid or most of the pyramid in which the government and the people survive in that country. Kicking out, where if you want to use the stool analogy, kick out a couple legs of the stool and it's going to fall over. They originally went at us through voting. They put Biden in. He was so disliked. And since he did not do what he was probably told as far as shoring up their position, uh, President Trump was able to get back in office, much to the chagrin of all the socialists, right? Because you had two people in the Democratic Party at that time. You had very dedicated socialists, ardent socialists. You had the grifters, okay? And you know who the difference is when you talk to them. So now the grifters are being jettisoned from the Democratic Party, which will leave you just the ideologue of the socialists of America. And that's what they are hitting you with now. Anyone that you see in any of those videos that says, I'm whoever and I served in this capacity in the armed service, especially the intelligence. I always laugh when CIA has a person on one of these things and they're like, I'm with the CIA and this shit's wrong. And one of the best quotes that we used in the paper article of this were quotes that were put out by uh, Ted. What the hell? It wasn't Kermit Roosevelt. Yeah, it was Kermit Roosevelt who overthrew the Iranian government in that operation. There are a number of quotes attributed to him on how he did it and how he had to overthrow the news media and how he was able to bribe the military. If any of you ever read the story of the overthrow of Mossadegh's government, you will see a lot of similarities here. The boys don't do a lot of new work. That's the problem with the boys. And so they're doing these things. It says if you're in the service and you're given an illegal order, it is up to you and your right to say, I will not follow that illegal order. That's great. What that usually means is if I have a bunch of people in a pit and there's a machine gun pointed into the pit and your commanding officer says, shoot those motherfuckers and then drop some grenades in to get the kids, you do not have to follow that order. That's what that means. That's the illegal order. Okay. Or if you were to see that World War I movie where the guy runs through the entire film, he goes to tell an officer not to send the boys over the top because they realize the artillery is still functional. And at the very end, he says to the officer, I'm telling you this is from the general. And he says, well, I don't believe you. And he says to the guy, you will be disobeying a legitimate order or a legal order by launching this attack. And that stops him because that's what we're talking about. Those are the things. Things that hurt your feelings when you're in the military are not the concern of the higher ups. And this is, we're talking about trying to cull away all these people who would care about your feelings and deprive you of the mission based on that. What they want to do here is very similar to what they did during, and you can look at one of our old pieces that we did. The destruction of the United States justice system is number one on socialists' radar, okay? Has been for many, many years. Socialism and attacking the United States legal system goes back to the civil rights time period. Also, more openly, I guess you could say, because you get in the weeds with that one, the death penalty, all those innocence missions and all those kind of things. It wasn't to save a bunch of poor blacks or poor Spanish or anything like that. It was to show people that you could tie up the justice system so bad as to make the death penalty irrelevant so that people wouldn't seek it. That is the whole point of socialism and its relationship with your justice system, is to show that it becomes irrelevant and that way the population won't miss it or its protections when it's gone. They decided that there's enough douchebags in the American military these days to take a crack at it over there. And that's where we take up our story for now. So I'd like to make sure if you have any family or friends that are in the military that are one of those stupid people, and I mean it as that, or have been swayed to some of the stories that are out there. You know, there are people that have had commanding officers who probably should be in prison right now, or at least working as, you know, not even assistant dog catcher someplace after having removed their rank and all their money and all their positions on the Raytheon. I'm not going to get into that. That'll get us in trouble. But I digress. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the growing trend of Democratic politicians and left wing operatives encouraging U.S. service people to ignore so called illegal orders. And this, by the way, also is part of the story that they tried originally to use on federal agents about the removal of illegal immigrants. And it didn't take because you can't tell them to not do it and then throw shit at them and try to set them on fire. Doesn't work. Also, last one before we get back into it, there was a movie made many, many years ago called Dr. Zhivago. And in Zhivago, the Alec Guinness character is a communist, and his job during World War I is to get military units of the czarist forces to defect and just say, I'm not going to fight in World War I. I'm going to go home. No war, just we're leaving and we're going home. There's a very good illustration of their technique in that movie. If you were to watch that film, it's kind of a date film, but you can watch that part and you'll understand that was an accurate portrayal of the things that they wanted to do. That is an accurate portrayal of what they intend to try to do here in the United States. Okay. So now back to the illegal orders. Last time, on paper, refusing an illegal order is absolutely correct. You will see it in Military Ethics 101, but that's not what's going on here. What we are seeing is something far more calculated and far more dangerous, as I explained earlier. This episode of this little podcast is going to explain what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means for the stability of the armed forces. So let's get right into that. And let's start by stating the obvious. The Democrats, aka the socialists, have figured out a new rhetorical tool. As I said, given the backstory, it's new for this time. The coup has not taken the way they wanted. They are working almost in scorched earth or trying to partition the United States into manageable sections where they can mount a counterattack against the government of the United States. That's straight out of a socialist playbook. We don't have to call for mutiny directly, meaning them. Socialists don't like their fingers on anything. If you meet the younger ones, they are always excited to hear that other people are doing things. That way they don't have to do it themselves. And that way they don't get caught. And that way they don't have to go to our prisons and meet all the people that they say are in there that are in there unjustly. And they don't have to say disobey the president. All they have to do is plant the seed in that mind is that when a conservative or Trump aligned president or commanding officer issues an order, maybe it's not legal. Maybe you shouldn't obey. Maybe you have morally obligated to resist, which you're not. But this tactic does two things simultaneously. And this is why it's very effective, especially in today's whatever with these people in general. The mindset has been crushed since COVID and a little bit before. It preemptively delegitimizes the commander in chief. People keep forgetting that Donald Trump is in control of all armed forces. Any president is in control of all the armed forces. When if a Biden or an Obama or a Bush or any of the other assholes that didn't do anything or did too much, as in the two wars that we had, too much of one and not enough of another, they hold the blame. You can blame the generals, but ultimately the buck stops at the president because that's who is in charge. You delegitimize him, you form a wedge between the president who runs the army and the army who may now want to run themselves like the Mexican army, which is a bunch of generals get together and start the plot against the executive branch of the United States, which we know has already happened due to General Mark Milley and his fucking assholes that all wrote those letters that said we have no faith in Donald Trump. That counts as, they should have gone to jail. You don't understand how much jail all those guys should have gone to. Maybe you do. Maybe I'm just wasting my time here. But, even as he issues an order, you're going to have activists are already trying to say it's reckless and authoritarian. The minute he says anything, it's already in the news. They have now gotten themselves where any real news article does not get into the news because they have to track the president. The first time he says this, it's illegal. Shooting those people in the boat, it's illegal. It's not, but it's illegal. They need you as a service person who may have your finger on a trigger somewhere to not pull the trigger. And then when you don't pull the trigger, you are a hero to the socialists and or you are one dead motherfucker because the other guy did pull the trigger or we know you didn't and now it's your ass when you come home. Those are your choices. It's injecting political interpretation into military obedience and there's no room for it in the service. And the moment a soldier starts listening to MSNBC for guidance instead of his commanding officer, the entire integrity of the U.S. military system cracks. It is not accidental. This is political engineering. This is narrative placement. Go get any book that talks about socialist coups anywhere in the world because they've occurred in a lot of places. But the government never stands afterwards. It degenerates into what you've seen in Africa and South America, right? You'll find it in union agitation manuals and things of that nature, anything classically Cold War era. So let's contrast that with the real world military law. There is a thing which I used to always, because I'm thinking like an idiot, I would always say it's universal, but it's not. It is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, for all of you guys out there, the gravy seals. The rule is simple. An order is presumed to be lawful. It must be obeyed unless it is manifestly illegal, which I explained the people in the pit with the machine gun. And legality is determined inside the military justice system, not on cable news. This is not vague. There is no ambiguity here. The UCMJ is written this way on purpose so the chain of command cannot be destabilized by rumor or politics or emotion. The military knows of what it speaks. It has had hundreds of years of having to deal with people who may have thoughts of their own, but are not going to help the cause. What can I tell you? That's how it works, right? Ask anybody who's in the Marine Corps. What do they teach you at Paris Island? It's not challenge authority. It's not challenge authority at all. Okay? All the services have it. The Marine Corps is just the most open and serious about it. And then blah, 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 down to the Air Force. We're not quite sure what they're up to. All right? So, and here's the problem. If political operatives are actively encouraging confusion, then the confusion isn't accidental, it's manufactured. And once that becomes systemic, it's no longer confusion. It's a soft form of insubordination being laundered through political rhetoric. We do have pushback still in the military against the Trump administration. I know people don't want to admit to it, but we have a Pentagon that leaks, as they used to say in that movie. It has more leaks than the Iraqi Navy. That's the Pentagon. They still aren't getting the method or the madness that they are going to be prosecuted soon. They've had their time. They've had their learning curve. They are getting out of their learning curve to the part where they are going to have a big shit taken on them, which means you're going to be demoted, you're going to be kicked out, you're going to be everything they can do to you. The reason that you can't do, this is my last aside on this, and you can check this, and I remember this from an actual discussion back when Milley was doing what he was doing. Why couldn't you court-martial Mark Milley? Because a court-martial usually has to have officers of a similar rank to yourself. These 3- and 4-star generals all know each other. So to get guys that you either helped make rank or helped you make rank to turn around and say you're a fucking monster and should be kicked out of the service or should be put under a jail somewhere is very hard to do. You see similar patterns occurring under the current Comey trial with people in justice helping to sabotage that investigation. And that's all, it's all straight up true. Go get the Bible. I actually believe in it. I'll put my hand on it. All right. So here's where things get really lopsided. If an E3 or an E4, that's enlisted, okay? O is officers, E's are enlisted men. Refuses a lawful order because a politician or an activist convinced them the president is issuing illegal commands, who's going to get punished? Is it that jerk off astronaut who's on television all the time? Mark, whatever his name is? No. Or the woman who said she was with the CIA, or the woman who said she was with the Air Force, and the guy who says he was in the Army and the Rangers and all this nonsense. Who is the one who is going to get put under the jail? It's the service member. So this, when a socialist does this kind of stuff, it is a win-win situation. They don't get in trouble. They cause this disruption, plus they get to remove a service member from his job. And that's the problem. The politician, the influencer, the activist, whoever it is, every civilian who instigated the behavior, they suffer nothing. No reprimand, no removal, no accountability. In fact, they usually get an attaboy from Hakeem Jeffries now that we know he takes child porno money, right? This is strategic and is a major issue when trying to confront this type of attack. You shift the burden onto young, inexperienced, politically illiterate enlisted personnel. Go out and get a bunch of them and say that I'm a terrible person for saying it. If we were to go through our entire young enlisted staff, I think we could sway a few of them to do a few things. All right. People who generally don't have lawyers, who don't have political power, and don't have the luxury of understanding how they are being used. We're not even talking about honey traps here, right? Meanwhile, the activists get to play the role of noble defenders of democracy. And the only one who's really suffering is the chain of command and the poor sucker who got pulled into this whole thing. The consequences of this type of a tactic are enormous. You are going to fracture your unit cohesion. You start wondering whether an order is lawful based on political opinion, not law, especially for those of you guys who are going to be frontline operations or are going to have to press the boom button or whatever. Officers are going to hesitate. They are fearing one bad faith interpretation could drag their career into a media storm. They're more worried about their career not going anywhere than going to jail. The enlisted people are more worried about going to jail than their career not going anywhere in general. Public trust is going to deteriorate. If the public thinks the military is being politicized, the entire institution will lose credibility, aka, like I said, every third world dictator general out there with a whole chest full of ribbons, basically for shooting nuns and 5-year-old kids in a ravine somewhere, right? Our foreign adversaries, since they are already being given daily printouts of what's being done, they get to exploit those cracks. The Russians and the Chinese have entire departments dedicated to sowing exactly this kind of doubt. And worst of all, we are forming a very dangerous precedent that we have not really had to deal with probably since, I don't know when it was I would say in World War II on our side. The other side has had, the English and everybody have had a lot more open traders. When we have found our traders, well, we'll talk about that another time. So anyway, this is how a tiny ideological trick becomes a major institutional crisis. So I want to be clear, the answer is not political retaliation. It's not going to go punch the astronaut in the face or whatever. Fun to do, but no. The correct response is the thing the military has always relied on: strict, apolitical enforcement of the UCMJ, period. Not because we want to make an example politically, but because the first few cases that we're going to have are going to set the tone. Remember Bradley Manning, right? How did that fall apart? The man was a traitor. He got out with a sex change, became a woman, and is out writing children's books or something. Okay? If those cases are handled with excessive leniency, which they have recently, operatives will continue pushing young troops towards disaster. This is ruining the rest of these kids' lives. They're 18 to 21, 18 to 23 is probably your target audience for this kind of an op. You get out of the service with dishonorable discharge, un-American activities, you're an asshole, blah, 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 blah. Where are you going to go to work, right? Where are you going to go to work? You're going to go work for Antifa? Because now we know what your face looks like, you fool. You can't even work with the people that you like because you're too big of a billboard for it. So, like I said, if the command reasserts itself firmly, clearly, and legally by the book, the political games stop instantly because the players no longer have a willing audience inside the ranks. The Pentagon has to decide which side of this war they're going to be on. Are they with the people who are trying to overthrow the U.S. government, or are they with the people that are running the Constitution and were elected to the position? All right. And somebody will say, well, who's that? The Trump administration, you fucks. The end, what we're really talking about is this: America's military has survived everything from Civil War to World Wars to Cold War to ignominious times in the last 30 years because it remained apolitical, disciplined, and unified under one commander-in-chief. Encouraging service members to ignore illegal orders when the orders in question haven't even been issued yet is not moral courage. It's not principled resistance. It is not noble civil disobedience. It is a political weapon disguised as moral guidance, a weapon designed to weaken command authority, fracture cohesion, and sow distrust. All right. You got to call it out clearly. A nation cannot function with a politicized military. Ask Brazil. A military cannot function with a fragmented chain of command. Same, same. And no service member should ever be manipulated into risking his future, including his life, because some of these things are death penalty offenses and they will fucking kill you. And you are not going to go out to the civil courts for this. Risking your future to serve someone else's political agenda. You people will not even be a footnote in the history of the socialist movement if you do this thing. So, anyway, that's about it. Sorry we took so long. It's a topic that has to be discussed. It's nice to be able to say Trump will go to the Congress and hang all those motherfuckers, but that's not what has to be done. It's time for the Pentagon and the generals who are supposed to support President Trump's administration to start to grow a set of balls and do their job. You already know nobody can really fire you. So even if you play along with Trump for 3 years and they assassinate the rest of the Republican Party and put in whoever, Joe Stalin Jr. after that, you're still going to be safe. Or you'll be retired, one or the other, right? So don't worry. But all you guys, you young enlisted people who think somehow this is going to make your mark, don't fall for it. Don't be a fucking sucker all the time, you know? So anyway, that's all I have on that one. And we'll talk to everybody after the weekend probably. Have a good week and see you later.